What's up, everybody? It is Jordan here from Wednesday Night Warhammer with another Tyranid Tactics video. This week, we're focusing on the command point usage. How I think you should be using your stratagems, how you should be using your command points, how to use it efficiently, how to plan out your command points throughout the game, when to use certain stratagems, and when to maybe hold off on your command points in order to better traverse the game of Warhammer 40k. If that's something you're interested in, go ahead, hit the like, sit back, relax while we talk about stratagems and command point usage. I don't know if you guys have been seeing those Space Marine lists that are running out there with Gilliman and Marnius Calgar and just a bunch of different ways to generate more CP. It seems like they can pretty much do anything they want. Well, Tyranids are actually not that far off from that ability. Especially with our two units, the Hive Tyrant and the Swarm Lord. Hive Tyrant is going to allow for essentially 10 more CP every single game you play because his ability works on your turn as well as your opponent's turn. And if you are able to have your Hive Tyrant stay alive the entire game, then that's going to be 10 additional command points. It's pretty good. And then the Swarm Lord is just kind of the cherry on top. Extra CP each turn, no matter what. Boom, you get it. Now, oftentimes we are seeing just the Hive Tyrant and not Hive Tyrant and the Swarm Lord. I just feel like the Swarm Lord is just a tiny bit too pricey right now. He is a very good unit. Of course, he brings along his Vect aura, but the fact that the Hive Tyrant gives the advance and shoot assault aura as well as lethals, Tyranids are definitely leaning towards more a shooting army right now. You're pretty much just going to see the Hive Tyrant, and the Swarm Lord is not going to be seen as much. So in this video, when we talk about extra CP generated, we're probably going to be predominantly focused on the walking Hive Tyrant or the flying Hive Tyrant as opposed to Swarm Lord. But understand, if you're able to slam Swarm Lord in your list and make extra use of his extra CP every single turn, then Tyranids are definitely going to be generating quite a bit of CP, but we need to make sure that we're using it wisely. Using the Hive Tyrant's quote-unquote free stratagem ability each turn is actually kind of a skill. Yeah, I think even though it is free, I think you really should still plan out how you're going to use this ability. There's appropriate times to use it, and there can be times where maybe it's a little bit too eager. So let's talk about my thoughts on it. Of course, it's going to trigger each turn within 12 inches. So Tyranids love buffs, they love auras, they love being around this central Hive Tyrant. I think that's a really cool part of them because it does kind of fit into the lore. This guy's telling everybody else what to do, or he's a giant conduit for the hive mind. So being close to our Hive Tyrant is, of course, going to help him, help all of our other bugs. So you have to be within 12 inches of this Hive Tyrant, and that's just number one planning. Making sure that your units that are important and are going to need their stratagem support are going to be within 12 inches of the Hive Tyrant. That's just an absolute need. So during your movement phase, you have to triple check the models and the units that you want to be able to get discounted stratagems. They're going to have to be relatively close to the Hive Tyrant. And if you have a couple of units where you for sure know that they are not going to need stratagem support from your Hive Tyrant, maybe don't worry about that. Send them on their merry way and see what they can do without that reinforced support from the Hive Mind. So when I'm thinking about how and when I'm going to use this Hive Tyrant's ability, the first thing is on my turn, I'm often going to be using it more aggressively than it would be on my opponent's turn. The reason being, on my turn, I've been playing a lot of Invasion Fleet, of course. There's not a whole lot of stratagems that work on my turn as opposed to my opponent's turn. Invasion Fleet especially is often more reactionary than proactive. So you will actually see me a lot of times re-rolling things like number of shots on an Exocrine or a Maleceptor or something. And I do that pretty aggressively with my Hive Tyrant's ability because once my turn ends and it goes to my opponent's turn, if I did not use my Hive Tyrant's free stratagem, then that's basically 1 CP in the game that I didn't make use of. That is pretty much just gone. So, if I was using an actual command point for a number of shots reroll on an Exocrine or Maleceptor, I probably wouldn't. I would just keep the roll. And I'll talk about command point rerolls later on in this video. However, if I feel like there's really not anything else I'm going to use for my Hive Tyrant's free stratagem, there's a pretty good chance that I'll re-roll it. Because if I don't use that ability, then that's just one command point, hypothetically, that was not used in my game of Warhammer 40k. During my opponent's turn, it's a little bit different. I always try to plan out an invasion fleet. Again, we'll talk about this later. I'm pretty much always popping the 5-up Feel No Pain. And so the unit that I think is going to get that buff with the 5-up Feel No Pain, I'm going to want it to be within 12 inches of my Hive Tyrant. So if I'm throwing out a unit that I think is very high value, and I think my opponent's going to want to try and clear off the board, I'm going to try and position my Hive Tyrant in a way where it is 12 inches within that unit, so I can pop out that 5-up Feel No Pain. In addition, that's a stratagem that you can use in the shooting phase as well as the fight phase. So if I plan out, okay, my opponent's probably going to be shooting at these Gene Stealers, then I'm going to position my Hive Tyrant so he's within 12 of that. And then if my opponent's going to then charge my Maleceptor, then for both of those stratagems, I'm really only using 1 CP during that turn because I've planned out, okay, I'm using the free strat on these Gene Stealers, and then I'm going to use my actual CP for the turn on my Maleceptor. So it really allows for a powerful play and a stratagem that is very, very good, and it allows me to use it throughout the phase. Last thing before we move on from this slide, if my Hive Tyrant is in danger, I'm always going to want to use his free CP strat first, because if you don't use it, even for like an invulnerable save reroll, if you don't use it and your opponent kills your Hive Tyrant, then again, you're losing out on the efficiency of that additional command points that your Hive Tyrant can generate for you. Before we get into the main discussion about command point management and how I think maybe you should plan out your command points before you play the game, I want to talk about the stratagem, the command point reroll. It is very, very often a trap. I think it is best to focus our command points and how we use them on stratagems or actions in the game that will make a definitive answer. Those things are like, Insane Bravery is a great example of that, because for sure, without a doubt, that unit is not going to be battle shocked. It can hold an objective for you, can do actions, etc., and will score you points. As well as something like New Orders, where it's not definitive what secondary you're going to draw after you redraw that, but you will for sure not have that secondary, which I'm assuming you won't be able to score. So those are two really good stratagems that I think will oftentimes be better use of your command points than the command point reroll. The reason why I think it is such a trap is because you have the same amount of chance of rolling the number that you're re-rolling as you did when you rolled it in the first place. Whether that's a charge, whether that's an armor save, whether that's a number of shots, it can and might be the very same. So just understand that when you are about to use a command point reroll, there's a pretty good likelihood that you're stuck in the same spot you were when you thought about making this decision for a command point reroll. It's never a guaranteed success, and it's often a trap and maybe even a bad idea to reroll. Before we budget our command point usage, we kind of need to have an estimate of how many command points we are going to have during the course of the game, so we can kind of put things in perspective. Bottom line, both players are always going to have 10 command points during the game. One on your turn and then one on your opponent's every single time. That does not change. Your Hive Tyrant, and depending on how you can use it, could potentially double that amount if you're able to use it wisely. And then things like Swarm Lord, as well as discarding secondaries in order to gain additional command points, will also help you with that. I'll be honest with you, in our budget, we are not going to budget one, Swarm Lord, just because in this case I'm not running Swarm Lord. That's a different topic. And two, we are not going to budget in our scope of things with command points discarding secondaries. Yes, it will happen in your game, but I oftentimes think it is not a wise idea to assume you're going to get bad secondaries. You don't want to assume that you are going to get secondaries that you can't score, so that you discard them for command points, I think it is a better idea to plan on scoring all of your secondaries and approach your game plan like you are going to be able to score every single secondary in the deck, so that you're not, relying on that extra bump of CP. And when we're thinking about that, I don't put just a flat extra 10 CP on this command point budget for my Hive Tyrant, because I often commit my Hive Tyrant in some kind of engagement during the third turn. That's just a rough estimate, but I feel like the third turn is where the bulk of the units are activating into each other. And I'm going to want a powerful unit like the Hive Tyrant to be activating as well. So I'm going to estimate that maybe he dies by the end of the third round. And so my estimate for command points for us as Hive Tyrants is going to be 16 command points per game. And that's kind of how we're going to shift and plan our scope of command point usage throughout the rest of the duration of this video. We're going to take a look at two different detachments for Tyranids, and I'm going to show you how I've planned out and how I think about it, but I'm using this system that I've just kind of been bouncing around my head. So we break up our stratagems into different categories and kind of try to take a rough average of how often you're going to use these stratagems and how much, command points we're going to be using on these stratagems throughout the game, just to get a rough estimate of a wiggle room amount of command points at the end, to see if we can do stratagems like New Orders or Insane Bravery, Overwatch, command point reroll, etc., etc. So those categories are first, very frequent stratagems, very frequently used. These stratagems are going to be used basically once per turn. These are going to be the stratagems where you've almost, I don't want to say built your army around, but maybe a portion of your game plan is built around, okay, this unit's going to go out, I'm going to activate this stratagem, and it is going to do this thing. And basically, you're planning around that almost every single turn. Maybe it's a reactionary stratagem from your opponent activating into a specific unit, or maybe, it's an offensive stratagem that really allows for a unit to, bump up its offensive output in order to take out an especially durable unit. Next, we're going to have used. These stratagems are used, maybe every other turn or situational use. Maybe they're really good into specific matchups. Maybe they're really good with specific units, but it is definitely not a stratagem that you are planning in your command point budget to be used every single turn that you're playing in Warhammer 40K. Next up, we have seldom use. Very specific use, maybe activating into very, very specific units or a very specific unit using it. Niche opponents and niche units, maybe once or twice per game. And then last but not least, this category is the rare use. Maybe it's a bad stratagem. I'll be honest with you, I think there's a couple stratagems that I left out when thinking about Invasion Fleet and Vanguard Onslaught. And so that's kind of it. These stratagems that don't really function super, super well with your army. Maybe they're just not good stratagems. Maybe you'll be lucky to use these once every other game, maybe once in 5 games. And then the interesting part is our remaining command points after we think about all of those stratagems is our wiggle room. So this might be kind of like a little bit of a guideline instead of a law. Thank you, Captain Jack Sparrow, of how many times can you use something like Overwatch, or how many times can you use something like a command point reroll, or maybe a stratagem that is almost like a win more, almost like a stratagem that's going to push you further ahead, or maybe definitely not decide the game, but it could be a cute use of it. So this kind of gives you an idea of how often you can use those stratagems, and really what your budget of command points at the end of talking about all of those other important stratagems might be able to help you and sway your decisions in those really, really tough scenarios where you don't have time to think all too much about how important your command point is. When talking about Invasion Fleet, I've split up our stratagems, of course, into the very frequent used stratagem category, seldom used stratagem category, and rare use category. And let's talk about each of these and why I've split them up into those different categories. First up, Rapid Regeneration. It's the 5-up Feel No Pain if you're within Synapse. It is a stratagem that you're going to be using most of the time. If your opponent is activating into your units, you're going to want to be able to use the 5-up Feel No Pain to just give that much more survivability on your unit. This has very often had my Maliceptor, you know, stay alive through quite a bit of firepower. Kind of leaves the Maliceptor out as a trap for your opponent to activate into, because of course that 4 of invulnerable save plus the 5 of feel no pain can be very, very annoying to deal with. Very strong. Next up, we have stratagems that will be used. Endless Swarm, Predatory Imperative, and Overrun. Endless Swarm is, of course, the one where you regrow your Endless Swarm models like Gargoyles, Hormagaunts, and Termagants. It's very good for stealing objectives. It's very good for dodging Battle Shock checks. Did you know that? If you regrow your Gargoyle squad at all, it won't have to take a Battle Shock, because the bare minimum of a regrow strat is going to be 4. Even if your Gargoyle is at 1 model in the unit, you regrow 4, and then it's at 5. And by the time the Battle Shock step of the command phase rolls around, your Gargoyle unit is no longer below half strength. It's exactly at half strength, and then you don't have to take a Battle Shock check anymore. So instead of insane bravery on your Gargoyles, just boom, regrow them. Then Predatory Imperative, of course, if you're not sure if your Maliceptor is going to activate into a tank or if it's going to activate into an infantry, depending on how your shooting phase goes, why not both? Why not have it be good at both? And of course, you can do it with 2 different units as long as they're in Synapse. It's definitely a very powerful thing to know. And then Overrun is a stratagem that I feel like is not used enough. It is such a powerful stratagem. It can get you back behind cover. It can steal objectives. It can tie up enemy models. It can do so many good things that oftentimes your opponent is not able to plan around. So use Overrun more, guys. Absolutely. Seldom use is going to be Adrenal Surge. The reason why I think Adrenal Surge is not used so much is because it's 2 command points. 2 command points is a lot of command points. You oftentimes have to combo this with the Hive Tyrant so that it's really only 1 command point. I really like using it on my Hive Tyrant because I like to use the full melee Hive Tyrant, so that's 10 attacks split between 2 profiles. That's quite a bit of chance to, pop the lethals or the sustain on 5s and be really, really good. The Gene Stealers, however, with Adrenal Surge, really, really like that strategy. 40 attacks plus a Brood Lord. You can do some dangerous things with that ability. And then the very rare use, and it's been quite some time since I've used this, is Death Frenzy. Death Frenzy is weird because it's admitting that, yes, a lot of my models are going to be dying in this unit, and I am also okay with only fighting on death on a 4-up. It's not the best stratagem, and I honestly don't use it very often at all. All right, we're looking at our invasion fleet command point budget. Let's take a look at rapid regeneration. We're going to be using this stratagem a lot. I would say probably around 6 times, maybe even more throughout the course of a game, just because you're going to be wanting your things to stay alive, and your opponent is going to be doing their darndest to make sure that your things don't stay alive. So around 6 times, 6 to 8 times, I would think. I put 6 there just because, I don't know. I feel like if you're using it too much more than that, then maybe there's a argument where you could have played a little bit more careful with your units. Our use strat, we're probably going to use those stratagems around 4 times. So that's another 4 CP that we can averagely allot to our command point budget. And then seldom used stratagems, we're going to use to 1 to 2 times. So if we take on the upper end of that, let's say we are going to approach every single game with 12 of our command points used from all of that. I feel like that's pretty fair. I feel like that's pretty balanced, honestly. It's a pretty average approach to a game. And then with all of that, then that means we only have 4 CP left. Of course, this is considering our Hive Tyrant extra CP stratagem ability estimate that we talked about at the beginning of the video. So that 4 CP wiggle room is going to be best used for things like new orders, redrawing secondaries, things like maybe an Overwatch with your Neuro Tyrant. If you can just kill off a scoring unit of your opponent, make sure that they have a harder time of scoring points, or maybe like counter offensive, etc., etc. But if you go along that budget, notice that's only 4 command points, and the stratagems that I just mentioned are things that will for sure happen, for sure do a thing. If you spend that 4 command points of your wiggle room on things like command point rerolls, then it's gonna hurt your budget. It's gonna hurt your command point wallet. So, and this works with other detachments besides Invasion Fleet. We're gonna look at Vanguard Onslaught in a second, but kind of think about what you're going to use and what stratagems you like to use, how often you like to use them, and see where that command point wiggle room estimate is. And always kind of remind yourself of that before you go for those greedy stratagems like a command point reroll or something like that. It's always a good thing to keep in track. Can you believe that we are almost at 7,000 subscribers? That's insane here at Wednesday Night Warhammer. I just can't believe it. You guys are incredible. Thank you so much for all the support, of course. And if you have not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. I promise if you subscribe, I will tell this gene stealer to not take anything from your wardrobe. He won't steal your jeans, he won't steal your pants, or else I will tell him not to. Whatever he does after that, that's up to him. But if you're new to the channel, we've got weekly tactics videos just like the one that you're watching right now. We have battle reports every single Wednesday where we eat really, really spicy peppers. I ate a rather terrible one last week, and I probably will take a break from that. But it's always a good time. It's always relatively competitive lists as well. So you'll be entertained, hopefully, and you'll see some really good 40K as well. In addition, every Monday, I will have Tyranid Army List review shows where I get to review your list. If you want me to take a look at your Tyranid list, go ahead into our post part of our channel and then copy and paste your list from whatever, army creation software program you use. I'll take a look at it. Members are going to get a little bit of priority, of course, just as a thanks for, supporting the channel, but I will get to every Tyranid list eventually. I promise. And just to reiterate, subscribe. We're under 100 subscribers away from 7,000. Insane. Thank you for the help. Thank you for the support. Thanks for clicking that subscribe button. Using the same process with Vanguard Onslaught, it's very different detachment, but if you break down the stratagems, you can see there's also a lot of correlation between stratagems that you're going to be using very, very frequently, and maybe some stratagems that are not always going to be used. This one I did not take out. I did not include the rare use category just because I thought that all of Vanguard Onslaught stratagems really allow for the detachment to do the thing it wants to do. Invasion Fleet, the Death Frenzy kind of stuck out in a way where I didn't really think it was so beneficial to game plan. I didn't really feel like you would be, or I would be using it too much. But let's take a look at Vanguard Onslaught. Very frequent stratagems to be used is Unseen Lurkers. This is, of course, the lone operative. This is the stratagem that perfectly describes the definitive use of command points. You can, for sure, 100% know the movement of your opponent's models. Of course, when you take into account, like if they roll a 6 on advance, you should be able to know where every single one of your opponent's models is being moved at the end of its movement phase. So without a doubt, you can plan out using a lone op against your opponent. Understanding that your lictors with a 6-inch lone op can be very, very good at keeping primary. It's also incredibly strong at forcing your opponent to come to your side of the board where your Gene Stealers or Raveners or Tyranid Warriors can jump out and just get them. I really like Unseen Lurkers because it is a definitive result for one command point of use. Amazing. In addition, in the use category, 2 different stratagems. Surprise Assault, it will 100% of the time give you +1 to hit. It's very good, of course, on Tyranid Warriors. I've talked about this a lot. In addition, on Raveners, it's a really good combo as well. The Battle Shock +1 to wound is really nice, but it's not always what is going to happen, because Battle Shocks are actually pretty easy to pass in Warhammer 40K. So when I'm using this stratagem, and the reason why I think it's in the used category as opposed to the seldom used, is because 1 CP, you give a unit +1 to hit. Yeah, that seems really great. And then on the upside, if they also get +1 to wound, incredible. We love that. Then Hypersensory Cilia. This is the 2 CP scoot 2 Vanguard Invader units. It's very good. If you're able to use this with your Hive Tyrant, I think it is a very good use of your command points. It's just really nice. Really strong stratagem, and I believe it is the Tyranid's only real reactive move in the Codex, besides, of course, the Termagants, which is okay as well. Seldom use, we have a bunch of really good stratagems. Seated Broods, I like to use this with my Zoanthropes, coming in turn 1 to kind of just zap something right out of the gate. Invisible Hunters, this is the uppy downy one where you can pick up 2 Vanguard Invader units, or you can pick up 1 non-Vanguard Invader, I believe. And then Assassin Beast is where your entire unit is going to get precision in the fight phase into maybe a very valuable character, and you just really want that thing gone right now. Now, breaking down those different stratagems even more and kind of estimating the number of times that you're going to want to use those stratagems throughout the game. Unseen Lurkers, the Lone Op, we're probably going to want to use this 4 times. It is so much less than the 5-up Feel No Pain strat for Invasion Fleet because, of course, it only is able to be prevalent in your opponent's shooting phase. So the fact that it's not a stratagem you're using in the fight phase and it's not a stratagem you're using at your turn at all definitely brings it down to 4 times instead of the 6 to 8 times of rapid regeneration. But still, 4 times per game, that is a stratagem that you are definitely planning your game around. Next, in the use category, Surprise Assault or Hypersensory Cilia. I think these stratagems you're probably going to be using 3 times throughout the game. Of course, really try to make sure that you're discounting Hypersensory Cilia with a Hive Tyrant so that you're only using 1 command point on that instead of 2 CP. And then that's going to be around 3 CP per game. Again, this is just rough estimate on how I believe that I would play with these stratagems. And then seldom used, we've got Seated Broods, Invisible Hunters, Assassin Beasts, around 2 to 3 times. Now, there are a couple of builds in Vanguard Onslaught that you will see a couple of these used way more often, especially Invisible Hunters. If you're running double Mawlocks or triple Mawlocks even, like chat likes to run sometimes, then Invisible Hunters is going to be more in the used category or more in the very frequent use. My current Vanguard Onslaught build does not run triple Mawlocks. They just make me sad. I'm sorry. So that is why Invisible Hunters are going to be in seldom use. Although I do still think it's really good. You can scoop up some Gargoyles. You can scoop up a Lictor, get that free rapid ingress off of its ability. It can be a very powerful stratagem, but it is not a stratagem that I'm planning on using every turn or even every other turn. And then through that category of seldom use, again, it's going to be, let's say 3 times, 3 command points are going to be used through those stratagems. So for a total of around 10 CP, and if we are still using the Hive Tyrant, we're still using that Hive Tyrant estimation, then that means we have around 6 command points of wiggle room for using this detachment and for using our command points. My final thoughts on command point management, all of these estimates, all of these thoughts can and will be different from yours. This is not a concrete science. This is just a discussion to have you at least put in thought about when and how you're going to use your command points. So in the moment of when you are about to use a stratagem or when you are not about to use a stratagem, kind of think, am I budgeted for this stratagem purchase? If the answer is no, then just trust in the past you that has thought about this process, and hopefully that will lead you to victory. Planning command points out alone is really going to help you also understand your CP reroll dilemma. Going through those, the Invasion Fleet and of course the Vanguard Onslaught command point budget, really put into scope how few command points we have access to after we've used all of our stratagems that we know we're going to use. It's like 4 or 6 command points. It's really, really not a whole lot of command points to be used throughout the game that aren't already planned for. So it's very interesting. And each detachment, as well as every single list, is going to be different. So the way that you use your command points versus how I use my command points can be vastly different. That does not mean that either of us are wrong. It just means we're using our command points differently. I'm just encouraging you to try out this method. Try out planning out your command point usage. See if it affects your game plan, hopefully in the positive, and see if it can really magnify the importance of handling your command points appropriately so that, the Hive Mind can claim more biomass. Try it out and let me know how it works for you. All right, everybody, that is it for this week's Tyranid Tactics video. Thank you again for all the support. Subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this process. If you already have mapped out yours, I'd be very interested to see what kind of your command point budget is in the comments below. Let's take a look at it together and see if we agree, see if we disagree. Either way, I hope you have a great, wonderful rest of your weekend. I'll see you Monday or Wednesday. See ya. Bye.